Hi Booktube, Aaron here. Hope you're doing okay. Today I'm going to be talking about the books that I finished in June. So I'll be wrapping up June and then I'll be talking a bit about my reading plans for July. June was a very good reading month. In terms of the books I finished, it was quite a high number. I finished 9 books in June. But I was looking at the number of pages that I read as well, which was somewhere in the kind of, somewhere just over about 2,000 pages, something like that. And so although I finished quite a lot of books, it's looking like a lot of the books that I finished were longer books that I've been reading for some time, or I was also reading a few shorter books as well, a fair bit of poetry and stuff like that, which it was a nice blend, I suppose. It was quite productive, but it was also quite open and not too pressured. And I'm going to be carrying that over into July. I think I'm going to be paring back a bit of my reading. Because another thing that happened in June was that at the beginning of the year, I set my goal for the year, and I normally set it at 50 books to read in the year, which seems to be pretty attainable for me. And I've already hit that goal in June, so I'm definitely on track to be reading 100 books or more this year if I'm carrying on at the same pace. And it got me asking the question, am I reading too many books? Which I know is a bit of a weird question to be asking, definitely here on BookTube. But yeah, I was definitely asking myself that, and not necessarily that I'm not enjoying my reading, but am I trying to cram too much in? Am I giving the books that I am reading enough attention? And I think at the moment it is, but I don't want to keep just reading more and more and more, and it just kind of get a little out of hand, and that these books are kind of rushing by, and I don't have the the kind of internal storage space to actually remember what's going on and actually engage with them in the way I'd like. And so as you'll see a little later, I've kind of stripped things back a bit for July, keeping things relatively loose and open, and I'm just going to see what happens. Before I get into the books that I read in June, I'm going to go back to some stats that I'd started sort of cataloguing earlier this year, and I think for the last couple of months I've let it go. So I thought I'd just sort of catch up on them. So I think I've got it all right. So a few of the things I've been doing, I've had an alphabet challenge that I've been doing. So I've been trying to essentially, with the last names of every author I read, try and get through the whole alphabet. And let's have a look. I think the most popular letter so far is, let's see, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It looks like it's a 3-way tie. Yeah, it's a 3-way tie between B, H, and P. So for anyone who's interested in B, we've got Charlotte Brontë, we've got Borges, Anne Brontë, William Blake, and Isaac Babel. So that's 5 there. In H, we've got Tom Holland, Susan Howe, Ernest Hemingway, Bettany Hughes, and Ted Hughes. And in P, we've got Fernando Pessoa, Francis Ponge, Marcel Proust, Plato, and Sylvia Plath. So they're the most popular letters so far. The letters that I have so far to read a book for, or an author for, are I, J, Q, V, U, V, X, and Y. I've managed to hit Z with Yevgeny Zamyatin, so I'm quite proud of that. But I'm feeling a little scared for Q. And then I've also been trying to track the countries and also the languages, and obviously with history, the countries can be a bit murky, and so I've been a little loose with them. But in terms of countries, I think the UK and the US are tied with 13, I think it's 13 authors each. I've been going off authors rather than books. And after them, I think France is the next most popular. But so far I've read 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. I've read books from 15 different countries, I think, so far, if I'm counting correctly. In terms of languages, I've read from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 languages, if I've got that correctly. And English is still the most popular. I think it's 28. Yeah, so 28 out of the 49 authors kind of represented are English. So I think that's about half. No, it's not. Just over half anyway. But then again, French is doing pretty well. Russian and German are doing okay. Spanish is doing okay. And then we've got Portuguese, Latin, German, Russian, Finnish, Italian, and Greek. Don't think I'm missing anyone out, but we'll see. So anyway, that's how I'm doing with that thing for anyone who's interested. And now, if you're still watching, I'll actually get onto the books themselves. So I should be able to get through this relatively quickly because I've been doing these sort of random update videos where I'm talking a little more in depth about some of the books I've been reading. So the first two were covered in one I did at the beginning of June, and that's Mandeville by Matthew Francis, so a poetry collection kind of going through just the whole world of medieval exploration and medieval sort of travel literature, I suppose. And then we've got The Tenant of Wildfell Hall by Brontë as well, which again I discussed in that, so I'll pop it in a card or have it down in the description if you're interested in hearing me talk about those books. And also in that video I talked about Istanbul by Bettany Hughes, which I read on my Kindle, so that'll be in there as well. Since then I've also finished volume 4 of Remembrance of Things Past by Marcel Proust, so this is an ongoing thing for me, and I'm hoping to have Proust finished this summer, but we'll see how it goes. And I'll make a dedicated video on updating you on Proust eventually once I've gathered my thoughts. So we'll see. And again, another book that I've already discussed really is Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky. And I think this read through was kind of a reconnaissance mission almost. I definitely wasn't engaging with the book terribly deeply. I got a fair bit out of it, but the main sort of drive, I suppose, when I was reading this was just to read through it, to see what happens, to see what themes and ideas are coming up, and then eventually I'll reread it and maybe sort of slow down a bit and see whether that approach yields any different results. One I didn't mention, but I don't really have too much to say about really, is Rime by Dante Alighieri. So these are just poems by Dante that aren't the Divine Comedy or Vita Nuova, and they were good. They were translated by J.G. Nichols and Anthony Mortimer, and I've been finding when I read stuff that's translated by multiple translators, particularly when it's poetry, I tend to track which translator I prefer over the other, and I think I do prefer Anthony Mortimer as a translator, at least in this book, and they were good. There wasn't a whole lot that really grabbed me sort of personally and emotionally, although it did start getting a little more like that once I got towards the end and Dante was in exile, and there's kind of a bitterness and a hardness to his poetry in that period, and I was enjoying it much more then, and so it was good, and it was really getting me in the mood to read some more Dante. I don't know when I'll fit him in, but I want to read the Divine Comedy again at some point. I was thinking of August, but I don't think I'll get to it in August. And then I read The Peculiar Life of a Lonely Postman by Denis Thériault. I don't know if I'm saying that name right. And again, that was in the same reading update as Crime and Punishment. So again, I'll have a link for that. This was fun. It was whimsical. It was a little silly, but with some kind of dark twists in it as well. And so it was. I was recognising that a lot of my reading had been very heavy and quite dark so far that month, or just this year really. So I wanted something just a little silly, a little sillier, just to just as a palate cleanser, and it was really fun. And it's got loads of haiku in it. It's all about writing haiku, and so inspired by that, I picked up the Penguin Book of Haiku. So hopefully this is something. I actually hadn't put it down on my list of things to read in July, but I might actually dip into this Penguin Book of Haiku in July, but we'll see how it goes. And then this is the one book here, other than Rime, that probably could have gone into one of those recent reads videos, but I just, I didn't want to talk about too much at once, so I left it out, and that's We by Yevgeny Zamyatin, and I really, really quite liked it. It's a really interesting anti-utopian novel. I won't brand it dystopian, mainly because I find it a little bit annoying how much that word is thrown about, but also because, and I think in a way, even though 1984 is one of those books that's it's kind of the proto dystopian novel. Again, that's, I think, an anti-utopia as well, because I don't know, maybe it's just the influence of 21st century like YA literature, and how you have to have some kind of sort of rebellion against the regime, but definitely in Zamyatin, I think what makes it more of a anti-utopian rather than a dystopian is that in a way you're not seeing the sort of mechanics in place that are sort of keeping the society going, or maybe in a way you are, but there isn't as much of a distinction between the people who are enjoying the kind of profit of that and the people who are sort of keeping it going, if that makes any sense. So maybe, a film like Metropolis, you've got people underground working, and then you've got the people up in the metropolis at leisure, enjoying themselves, living, on heaven on earth, essentially. Whereas in We, it's a bit more mixed up, because it's kind of both at once. Everyone is undistinguishable. They're just a component in the machinery of this state. And although they're kind of classified by how they look and things, they all wear the same clothes, and though they have different jobs, that they're all, in a way kind of equal, but they're all in a way kind of anonymous, and definitely not really fully realized individuals. And so in a way I'm not I'm not really going to call it a dystopian, because it's getting myself in a muddle here. But yeah, I'm not really going to call it a dystopian. I think it's an anti-utopian. It's showing you a sort of quote unquote utopia, and it's using its what this society is calling its perfection, its superiority, to make a point and show you really how bad it is. So it's all done through irony rather than tension, is kind of where I'm going. Anyway, that's a bit too much of a ramble. I wish I'd kind of got my thoughts straight on this before I started talking about it. But all that is to say, I enjoyed it. I found it really, really fascinating. Yeah, I think it's worth sort of reading for its own merit. Lots of people say how much of an influence it was on 1984. But I think that the differences between it and 1984 are really quite interesting, and I think just make we seem all that more important. And I don't know, it kind of speaks in a much broader context than 1984 as well. So that was pretty interesting. And then before I ramble myself into an early grave, the last one is Duino Elegies, which again has had quite a lot of airtime this month. So I won't really say anything more about it, but I reread Duino Elegies this month, and it's just been incredibly rewarding and enriching, and is probably my favourite thing that I've read so far this year. So that's everything that I finished in June, and I'll try not to do that much more rambling. The books that I'm working on at the moment and will carry me through the beginning of July are The Castle by Franz Kafka, which I'm really enjoying, and it's it's dark, it's absurd, and it's kind of hilarious. I don't often laugh out loud. I mean, I might chuckle or grin, but this is like I've had to put the book down because of how much I was laughing. And I was laughing not because it's outright funny, because it's so frustrating. So it's a weird kind of humour, but it does appeal to me in a kind of twisted way. And then I've not got it here because it's an ebook, but I've also been reading in little pieces the Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, and that's just something I'll be sort of dipping in and out of as and when. So don't really have any set plans on when I'll finish it, but it's a good one to read on the train or something. Just read little bits from it. And then my reading plans for July. So I've only got really 2 things that I'm set on reading, maybe 2.5 if you count the haiku. So I might try and finish or get a good chunk of this Penguin book of haiku done. But one of the things that I've said I'll read in July is it's going to be a buddy read with David Wiley, and it's the first time I've read something with David for a while, and we'll be starting this in the second in the second week of July, and it's with reading events and stuff in the year, one of the biggest ones is Jane Austen July, and I feel like everyone needs to read something by for Jane Austen July, and so for Jane Austen July this year, me and David are going to read King Lear by William Shakespeare, and we'll be reading that in sort of the second week of July. I don't know, it might spill over into the third week. We'll see how it goes. But yeah, I think King Lear by William Shakespeare is, I think, the one thing by Jane Austen that isn't talked about the most. So we'll see how that goes. I now need to write a kind of spoof sci-fi novel about Jane Austen and a time machine going back to Shakespearean times. And then the other thing that I'm set on reading for July, and again it's not that much of a surprise, is Remembrance of Things Past by Marcel Proust, and this has got 3 volumes in it. So it's got The Captive, The Fugitive, and then Time Regained. Part of me is wondering whether I'll be able, if I'm not putting too much on my plate, whether I'd be able to finish this in July. To say this is just over 1,000 pages, about 1,100 pages, and to say I read about 2,000 pages a month, it's definitely attainable. But again, I think it comes down to how much I can process and just how slowly I need to take it, because I think you have to take Proust at his own speed. And then the last thing I want to touch on then is poetry, and with definitely with Rilke and with Louise Gluck, I've been, and with Sylvia Plath as well, I've been rereading sort of books of poetry that I've read in the past, and just trying to come at them from a different angle, or just see, what was it that I liked about it last time? Do I still like those things, or have I changed, or are there other things that I appreciate? And it's kind of prompted me to go back to poets I've read and to reread them, which I've always wanted to do, but I just felt like it's just something I'm in the mood for, I suppose, at the moment. So I've got a handful of kind of possibilities of just books I might reread. Just before filming this, I just went to the shelves and just pulled the ones that were I don't know, just seemed appealing in the moment. So we've got The Unaccompanied by Simon Armitage. One of his more recent poetry collections, but I think it did come out about 10 years ago. Oh no, 2017. I read this about 3 or 4 years ago, so I might give that a reread. Insistence by Albert Darcy. So again, I think I read that about 4 years ago, so I'll give that another go. T.S. Eliot, again, this is 4 quartets. I think it has been about 4 years again since I read that, so a bit of a common theme with those ones. Same again for like the next two. Got Stowaway by Richard Gwynne, which is a sort of crazy, I don't know, sort of adventure across the Mediterranean or the Levant. Woods, etc. by Alice Oswald. I think this is the first thing I ever read by Alice Oswald, and she's since become one of my favourite contemporary poets. So it's just interesting to see where it all started, and just to see what I first found interesting in this poet and in her poems. And then the last two, we've got Like by A.E. Starlings. Again, one of my favourite contemporary poets, but this is the only full book of poems that I've read. I've read a few other bits and pieces sort of online, and in some like sometimes the poems turn up in the London Review of Books and places like that. So I've read a few other poems here and there. This is the only book of hers I've got, and I think I might reread it, and then I need to pick up some more A.E. Starlings at some point. Although she has proven quite difficult to find, but I'll work on it. And the last one is War of the Beasts and the Animals by Maria Stepanova, who was really one of my favourite sort of new discoveries from last year. She's a poet and an essayist, these poems are just, I don't feel like I sort of got everything from them, but there was something really arresting to them. It's only been a few months since I read them. I think I read them in November last year, so it'll be interesting just to see what I remember and see what else comes out. And there we go. That's everything I got planned for July. Everything I've read in June. It's a little scary how quickly the year's going by. But I don't know. I'm one of those people who can kind of obsess on how much time is going by, and yet at the same time I really don't make the most of the time I've got. So one of my non-bookish goals was really just to do a better job of not putting too much pressure on myself to be productive or anything like that, but just to be more aware of the time I have, and that maybe in the long run, an hour isn't all that much time, but in a day, you can get a lot done in an hour, or it's a significant amount of time. So that's something I've been working on a bit. So even though the year is going very, very fast, I'm not feeling too bad about it. About this time last year, I think I was feeling very, very depressed about how quickly time was slipping away. And I'm a little less bothered now, which is quite nice. But anyway, with that, I think I'll leave you. That's more than enough rambling for one day. So I hope you're doing well, and I hope you have a lovely July, and I'll see you soon. Bye.